32 ticks following, so they are swallowing. Monkey is swallowing. Snake self swallowing. Next, a swallow too will fly and come and swallow. You're ever swallow in a hollow gallow, making a whole lot of halabaloo. Jalekalu, we know say you chop the money some, so give me the loot.
This poem is called History in Black, and it is for all Black women everywhere. Black woman, Black woman, Black woman, Black woman, Black woman, Black woman, Black woman. Black woman, put down your market bag for a moment. Take a break from your organizing. Close down the computer screen and come in. Come in, Black woman, come in and take a reasoning. I'm calling all Black women from across the land, African, diasporic, academic, intellectual, transgender, cisgender, no gender, two-spirit, African, queer, lesbian, all spectrum, all ability, middle class, working class, wealthy, African, laborer, activist, scientist, farmer, teacher, lawyer, fashionista, African, socializer, healer, architect, politician, producer, writer, African. Black woman, come. Pacific, come and take a seat and sit down upon the ground. Let me and you, Black woman, have a long conversation about your heart. Yes, the health of your heart. Within the nation, Black woman, we cannot live without our lives, our beating hearts from the very beginning to the very end. Black woman, come, take a seat and sit down on the ground and let me and you, Black woman, African, have a conversation about your heart. Your heart big and open and wide like the ocean, unending, Black woman, like the Nile is long, absorbing human misunderstanding, miscommunication, and misinterpretation, Black woman, dissolving your heart, dissolving human macro and micro aggression. You know about aggression, Black woman, dissolving, remedying human racism, Black woman, prejudice, bias, and appropriation, Black woman, in a world that chooses to forget that this humanity, yes, this humanity spring up from the loins of an African woman. Black woman, you're in a stand, Black woman. Black woman, publisher, makeup artist, designer, videographer, radio announcer, Black woman, news anchor, neurosurgeon, reporter, organizer, doctor, basketball coach, feminista, chef, dancer, spoken word artist, Black woman, advocate, computer programmer, revolutionary, bodybuilder, engineer, actor, Black woman, educator, photographer, painter, womanager, African, Black woman. Your tender Black woman heart, tender like rain cloud, swell up, pregnant with tears ready to fall, washing away the troubles, Black woman, always washing away the troubles, teaching us how to wash away the troubles of misogyny and classism and homophobia and bigotry, Black woman, whether you're in the front or behind, whether you are a frontline worker or you're doing quiet maneuvers from the corner, Black woman, you're tender, Your tender, stubborn heart, Black woman, refuses to stop beating and beating and beating, resisting erasure, exclusion, violence, poverty. Your heart steady, 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 steady. Your heart steady like generations upon generations. Pre-slavery, Black woman, because your story start from the very beginning. Your story of freedom fighting with a heart that beats even after individual death. But boom, 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 boom. Whether one falls, another one is born, and that cycle, Black woman, continue. Your heart, Black woman, beats its ways through feelings of ostracization and isolation because your Black woman heart believes in collective action. Oh, yes, Black woman. I'm calling all of the Black woman, you know. I'm calling all the African playwright, therapist, DJ, and filmmaker, chiropractor, scientist, entrepreneur, researcher, baker, African, event planner, musician, singer, midwife, blogger, tattooist, and youth worker, African Black woman, storyteller, world leader, daughter, sister, auntie, mother, friend, healer, Black woman, African. Calling all of you from across the land. Now, sometimes, Black woman, I know that sometimes the weight of your heart so heavy that it crack and break underneath the stress and underneath the strain of the everyday. But remember, Black woman, resilience, excellence. Resilience, excellence. That is your heart's middle name. That sweet sugar dumpling, ackee and saltfish, peas and rice, fufu, kele, wele heart of yours. That heart of yours, Black woman, you know that it is like a blossoming flower of excitement and possibility and playfulness and sensuality, Black woman. The personification of the sensual Black woman. The full moon, dreamer of all realities. Remember, the mother, quite simply, the mother of humanity, right? Black woman, hold your heart. Hold your heart for a moment now, Black woman. Hold your heart gently with all of the joy that you can muster somehow, Black woman. Black woman, hold your heart, and I want you to whisper a chant of I love you. I love you. Breathe in, Black woman, and breathe out. And feel your heart smiling out loud. Feel your heart relax and grow deeper. Feel your heart expand and become wiser. Feel your heart beating for all your ancestors upon ancestors who are so proud. They are so proud. They are so proud. They are so proud of you, Black woman, for all that you are. For all that you are, for all that you do, for all that you are, for all that you do. Black woman, it is you who keeps the whole world turning. It is you who keeps the whole world turning. Keep growing, Black woman. Keep leading, keep learning. integrity, humility. These are your power source. And when you're feeling sadness, Black woman, stay the course, ancestors. When you're feeling anger, Black woman, stay the course, ancestors. And when you're feeling lonely, stay the course. And when you're feeling hate, stay the course. And when you have a day that's just not going great, remember your ancestors. Stay the course. Keep the whole world turning. We need you, and we love you, and we know that we are of you, Black woman. It has been such an incredible journey to arrive at this place. And this place where I am right now, I don't consider it to be any kind of end place, but it is a good place and it is a grounded place. And I was able to get to this place because of my mother. Let's just be absolutely honest and go to the source. My mother had me at 15 years old in Jamaica, in Kingston. And we come from what is called in Jamaica a garrison community, in other parts of the world, a ghetto community, a working class community, a people of workers. And I think about how it is that we arrived in that place. We arrived in that place because of colonization, right? Colonization literally having Europeans go to the continent of Africa, and with certain co-conspirators were able to take our people out of the continent, bring them back to the Caribbean, bring them to North America, bring them to Brazil and South America, bring them to Europe, and force them to labor and to turn the bodies of our ancestors into commodity. And you think of the ramifications, the effect of that system on a country like Jamaica that had indigenous people there, the Tainos, the Arawaks, the Caribs, and then the bringing of African peoples and African peoples from different nations of peoples, strategically done that way so they wouldn't be able to speak together. But of course they did, because we're brilliant. So they created a new language called the Jamaican Nation language, which is a mixture of African languages and then heavily influenced by the language of the colonizers, so heavily influenced by English. And you can imagine that at this point in time, Jamaica it's a classist society, like every other post heavy quotations colony, because the legacies of colonization, where you have a wealthy class that also, is paralleled with the shade of one's skin, and then a large working class, underclass, or economically depraved class. That reality, that system is still very much in place. One could even argue that colonization ended on paper, or they just changed the paper, just changed their clothes. You know what I'm saying? Because Jamaica is still that society where so many Black African peoples are impoverished because of the system of enslavement and the system of colonization. So my mother had me at 15. And I was so blessed to be raised in the hood. Thank ancestors. Because growing up in a working class neighborhood taught me so many things about my Africanness. It was growing up in that working class neighborhood that deliberately challenged shame around being a Black woman and looking the way that I look and being shaped the way that I'm shaped. Because growing up in the hood meant access to dance hall music, which celebrated this body, this womanhood, this Africanness. Growing up in the working class neighborhood of Maxfield Avenue meant that I had access to Rastafarian philosophy, which celebrated Africanness and which challenged the middle class and upper class, heavily colonially influenced idea of what is beautiful and what is poetic and what is intelligent. And of course, in all of those examples, what is beautiful, what is poetic, what is intelligent is what is white or what is closest to whiteness. So growing up in the working class neighborhood that I did meant that I had everyday access to my language, which was the closest to African, because the official language of Jamaica is English. Yet the people, the working people, we speak Jamaican. right? Jamaican sound like this. Like some people tell me say it sound like Nigerian pidgin, like it's a mixture. You can't hear some of the English word then, but if me really go deep in it, you have to really work out to understand what me I say. You see me, because it's heavily influenced by African languages. And how absolutely amazing to grow up working class and have access to that, have access to a sense of self where colonization ruptured our sense of self by ripping us from the motherland and putting us with each other, not being able to communicate with each other. But you know what we did, right? You know what we did, right? We survived. And not only did we survive, but we found deep and profound and ongoing moments of joy to survive. That happened in the working class neighborhood that I grew up in. So we created new forms of worship that were syncretized. So we brought our African traditions inside of our bodies. And when that slave master overseer thought that we weren't celebrating our goddesses and our gods, for me specifically, that celebration is very heavily influenced by Ifa. Absolutely heavily influenced by Eshu, Chango, Ochun, Olodumare, Oya, Yemaya. These are the energies that I call into my life to understand who I am. But growing up working class gave me access to all of that. The syncretism allowed us to put the colonizers' religious structure in the front while celebrating ourselves in the back, because we had to find clever ways to survive. So when I reflect back to growing up in Jamaica and what my mother exposed me to, because she insisted, yes, you need to speak this language, even though growing up, we're being taught in middle class spaces, like in school, English being beat into us to speak English, and being taught Christianity, being beat into us Christianity and a Christian God and Jesus, etc., etc. What my mother did, my mother, who was one of the pioneers of dub poetry, her name is Anita Stewart. What she did, having me at 15 years old, you can imagine, what she did was she taught me these other ways of being, along with her colleagues of activists and Rastafarians and dub poets and feminists and queer people, all existing somewhere below the mainstream. She exposed me to all of that. That can happen in a working class neighborhood in Jamaica. Yeah, regardless of all the things we hear about Jamaica, even down to the homophobia that we hear about Jamaica, there's a lot that happens in a working class neighborhood that goes below the radar, that somehow allows you to find yourself. Now looking back, I am so grateful. I didn't understand when I was growing up, but I'm so grateful, because at this place where I find myself is being able to have the resources to challenge the ongoing violence, the anti-Black violence that we are surrounded by. What is that violence? That violence is a violence that tells us that if we connect with nature, or we connect with the sun, the moon, the water, the elements that are around us, which is originally these deep philosophical, indigenous Black African teachings, that we are a part of everything that is around us, that we do not exist in a vacuum, that we cannot excuse ourselves from nature and then create some idea of God that is separate from nature, that is separate from us. But in fact, that we are the goddess, God, that entity manifest. We are it, constantly making and remaking ourselves. For me, this Blackness, this Africanness, growing up working class, growing up close to the land, growing up in the dirt. Do you know we had dirt in our yard, where I remember, paving over your yard was like a sign of economic privilege. It was a sign of something to be celebrated. If you could pave over your yard, basically throw freaking whatever it is that they used to pave to kill off the plant them, then that meant that you were advanced. But I know, because I grew up poor. I grew up in the dirt. So my hands were dirty, my feet were dirty, in the dirt. Thank goodness. Oh, I thank the ancestors. Oh my goodness. Now I realize. Do you know, now they're talking about how growing up in the dirt can builds your body against these invading pathogens, because your body knows how to fight. Surprise, surprise. Who didn't know that? I know my granny knew that. My granny could have told you that. Do you know what I'm saying? All of this is to say that my belief system is so deeply grounded in the working class African Jamaican reality that at the time I didn't know was preparing me to be able to be empowered and embodied in my Blackness. That my relationship to the water and to the sun and to the moon and to these ideas that are so deeply, deeply a part of the Orishas, if you consider the Orishas and the elements that they're connected to, that it make complete sense. Deep philosophy, old philosophy, right? That we end up creating systems of worship that will prolong our humanity and that helps us to understand each other, that is a belief system that is worthy, that is a belief system, and beyond worthy is just common sense. It's just common sense. You see me? If my body is made up of dirt and water, and I need sunshine in order to convert vitamin D for my bones and my skin and my teeth and my blood, then it just makes absolute sense that my spiritual system, the system of worship, would be connected to the fact that my body is made up of dirt and sunshine and water. That's just common sense. So me, I'm not even into the defending the very fact that this is grounded in African Jamaican spirituality, because it just is logical. It's actually just logical. You know what I'm saying? And do you know, the first thing I think of is arriving at a place where we don't need to seek other people's approval. If I think of the most devastating experience of my life as an ongoing experience, it is this reality that is reflected back to me that I need someone else to tell me that I am beautiful in order to know that I am beautiful. I need an external system to tell me that what I am thinking intellectually is brilliant, for me to know that what I am thinking is brilliant. And what this society does, what this colonization, this coloniality does, is it makes sure to surround us with messaging that is constantly reinforcing you are not enough, you are not enough, you are not enough. And that not enoughness is you are not beautiful enough, you are not intelligent enough, you are not organized enough, you are not thin or big enough, you are not everything enough. That is the one, that is the insidious, just monstrosity of colonization. So instead, we then, because we're human beings, because we're social creatures, because we are a part of the collective, we then spend our entire lives trying to become enough. Whether that is in the family, working to death, trying to be enough of a wife or a partner or a mother, or in the workplace, trying to be enough of a professional, trying to not be impacted or affected by all of the madness that is around us, trying to be beautiful enough in all the dysfunctional ways in which we're made to do that. And we have multiple capitalist industries that continue to essentially enslave. That we, because we're human, because we're social creatures, and because of all the social conditioning from within the family and outside of the family, we are constantly in this rat race. So what do we need to do in order to take our rightful place? Oh, I think we have to just reject all of that. I want to swear because it's a part of my poetry, but I will not swear because I want the youths to listen to what I'm saying. Okay? So I wanted to play on air. We have to resist the seduction of trying to prove ourselves to people out a road. For me, this is it. And for me, the experience of withdrawing from that equation of to be, you've got to prove that you're woman enough, you've got to prove that you're beautiful enough, you've got to prove to them that you're talented enough, you've got to prove to them that you're sexy enough, you've got to for me, withdrawing from that, withdrawing into Yemaya, withdrawing into Oshun, withdrawing into Oya. Oya helps me to realize that beauty is for me to decide. Because Oya is like, I mean, I don't business. Ooh, I don't care if you don't find me beautiful or you don't find me beautiful. Guess what? I'm powerful. Zin. Do you know, Oshun allows me to find my sensuality for myself in my own body. And Yemaya allows me to remember that everything I do is magical, that I am indeed the mother. And not the mother as in like Western concepts of the mother where a woman's place is in the house and blah, blah, bullshit. I'm talking about the African sense of mother in the sense of leadership, the responsibility and accountability and ability to lead. Black women, you know. Do you know what I'm saying? There's social conditioning, and then there is knowing that comes from cellular memory from centuries and centuries and centuries of existing on this planet and birthing all that exists. You know. So then we have to dig into that knowing, and it's the spirituality that's going to take us there. It is the spirituality that's going to take us there. We have to reformulate a spirituality that centers our Black womanhood. And we have to dare to tell these people who would dare to tell us that we don't belong because we choose to do whatever we choose to do. We have to dare to tell them, well, you know what I want you to tell them. I'm not going to say it on air. We have to dare to do that. And then, yes, there are consequences. Yes, there are consequences. There are consequences. But we have to keep our eye on 7 generations to come who we are envisioning. So then we've got to occupy that space of absolute defiance. How do we take our rightful place? How do we take our rightful place? What is happening in the world today? Do you know that this global movement of resistance is being led by who? By who exactly? Who is leading this global resistance? Black women. Black women. Black women. Black women who are daring to stand up not only for ourselves, but for everybody else. For everybody else. Do you understand? So we can see the impact of absolute defiance. When Black women decide to defy the rules, when Black women decide to say no more, guess what? The whole world follows. Surprise, surprise. Well, it's like following your mother, isn't it? I'd like to end this session with a poem called Say Her Name. And this one is for all of us as we keep the names of all the women who have given their lives for us deeply in our mouths and in our hearts. We cannot live without our lives. You know, we cannot live without our lives. We cannot live without our lives. We rebirth ancestors as children who may leave us when we are 70, and at 70, we too old for them to parent, we cold erased alone, but we cannot live without our lives. You know that. We cannot live without our lives, bludgeoned and betrayed by wombs and knives and barbed wire and bombs that explode our houses and our hearts. We caught in the crossfire of property and potential. We, the trophies of war, ownership, silence, violence, but you know that we cannot live without our lives. We stitched lips shut, necks noose broken, hands bent backwards. We carved open, but you know we are no feeding ground. We are no feeding ground for the hungry monsters of humanity who eat our children, who eat our seeds, who eat our water, who eat our forests and our animals, and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. We know that it is enough. We know when enough is enough. Let us begin to deeply know that we indeed make this world go round. And when I think of how this world go round, I think of you, my people. You make this world go round. This 365 days of revolution, 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 revolution is a brewing in our cauldron, because these times of lynchings and burnings and rapings and bombings, these times of colonialings, these times must end, because we know we cannot live without our lives. We know we cannot live without our lives. I am the daughter of a mother who is the daughter of a woman, and you are the child of a person who is the child of a human. We human, and we cannot live without our life. Don't live without your life. One love.
My name is Chris Abani. I also have many names, as many Africans do, particularly Nigerians. My Igbo name is Uchechukwu, which literally means the wisdom of God or the imagination of God. My Ifa name is Onifade Odushakin. Onifade means the owner of Ifa has returned, and Odushakin means Odu, who is the primary Orisha, always protects me. So in a sense, you could say my name is Christopher Uchechukwu Andrew, which is my Catholic confirmation name, Abani, Onifade Odushakin, Omo Daphne Hunt, which was my mother's name. And naming is very important, and how one comes to name is also very important. Traditionally, if you're following the Ifa system, which I should point out that because I'm Igbo, I follow Ifa and Afa. So Afa is really just the Igbo name or variation of Ifa. But for colonial reasons, and because Igbos didn't have kingdoms per se. I don't want to get into an argument of history. We can talk about that in more detail, but empire always helps any kind of spiritual path be sustained. And so we find that amongst the Yoruba, Ifa has remained largely intact. I would say 55% intact. So in the Ifa worldview, or even really in most traditional African societies, once a child is born, the child has to have a naming ceremony. In Ifa, we call it a sentaye. In Ifa, in Igbo, we say igweha, which literally means to name someone, but it also means to divine for a name. And usually, once a child is born, for the first 3 to 8 days of its life, its feet never touch the ground. And particularly in the old Yoruba system, because then the first time your foot touches the ground is literally when your foot is placed on the Bonifa that has Yerosun. So your first footprint on the world is how we read your spiritual destiny, what is available for you. So in a way, you can argue that your name is in many ways meant to be a talisman. It's meant to be, in its own case, a process that unfolds the way most processes unfold and leads you towards two parts, what you could call your fate and what we can call your destiny. So, for instance, being named Uchechukwu, then it seems to be no accident if it's the wisdom of God we're looking about. So the primary drive of my name is to seek wisdom, which has been my life's goal as a writer, as a poet, even as a photographer, as an academic. And so the idea is that if you're in alignment with, in Yoruba we would say your Ori, in Igbo we would say your Chi, then your name should unfold your life for you. So this is how we come to name. And of course, as you're growing up, there will be other people interacting with you, family members, who may also add names to you as you grow up. In fact, they may only call you that name. So, for instance, I am supposed to be, I use the word suppose for the skeptics out there, I'm supposed to be the reincarnation of my grandfather, whose name was Idumechukwu, or rather, I should say my grand uncle. Those of you who grew up in a West African context, it's difficult to separate father, grandfather, uncle, because everybody's your grandfather, everybody's your uncle. So my grandfather's brother was Idume. And when I was born, my grandfather, from the day he saw me, which was actually, I was already probably about 5, because I was born just as the Civil War erupted, and I was barely weeks old when we had to flee Nigeria. But he always called me Ogbo, which means almost like saying Ebon, which means sort of like my particular close friend. Or he would call me Idume. Or he would call me by Idume's title, because he was a Babalawo and a herbalist in the Igbo context, what we would call a Dibia Afa. And his name was Ezerose, because Orisha in Igbo is Erose or Alose, depending on the dialect. And so Eze is king of. So whoever's a chief priest, or like an Oluo in Yoruba, and Igbo would be Eze. So Ezerose, which the problem with traditional systems of spiritual expression is that they don't fit into English. Traditional philosophies are so much more complicated than one can imagine, and they make English a very ineffectual vehicle for carrying the ideas. So sometimes people may translate Orisha as a goddess or god, but that's such a grossly inadequate expression. I mean, Orisha, or Erose. So in a way, one can argue that the bundling of your life, which is partly done usually with an expert diviner or like a very old member of the family who has capacity to dream, is to set you on your path, so to speak. And then later on in life, as you move forward, you will be given, in Igbo we say your kamalo, in Ifa it's your first hand of Ifa, which essentially is your fate, which drives you to your destiny. And destiny has nothing to do with the job you make on it. Human beings all have the same destiny. We have different paths in life, which is your Ifa, and then you have different purposes, which are other smaller subsets. So you can already see that to say what you can say by asking if someone says their Ifa is Ogbewate, you can immediately know things about them on all those 3 levels. Whereas if you were looking at it from English, you'd take half an hour just to explain one thing. So that's my name. I'm many things. I'm a novelist. I'm a poet. I write screenplays. I've written plays. I teach. I'm an academic. I'm a researcher. I'm what you might call a creative scholar. I teach at a major American university. And then at the same time, I'm a practicing Babalawo. By practicing, I mean I have an actual practice. I have clients. I do divinations. I do rituals. I do Ebo. And it's an interesting way to juggle multiple beingness in the world, which as one goes deeper into Ifa, or one can even say Sheshe, you will find that it's really about understanding the complexities of what a human is. But it can be difficult to balance even yourself psychologically, to go from doing an Ebo where you may have had to offer a goat to ancestral entities, and then to take a quick shower and jump into a classroom and discuss the better parts of Wittgensteinian philosophy. But this is the beauty of traditional systems, is that they're able to hold simultaneity with a lot of grace. So you can argue that in the West, we say you are this or that. So a thing is this or that. But in traditional thought, a thing is this and that. And the moment you have those two, you have more. So in Isheshe, or what we'll call Igbo Ordinala, the mathematics is not 1 + 1 = 2. 1 plus 1 automatically equals 3, because if you put two things together, a third thing develops already. And once you have 3, you start to move in sort of fractal encroachment. So 1 plus 1 is 3, then it's 3 equals 9, 9 equals 12. And so suddenly the math is exponential, because the ability to live a simultaneous life cannot be contained by linearity or even circularity. It becomes an entanglement. So time in Igbo, Akile, or in Yoruba, Lailai, is neither linear nor circular. It is an entanglement. So I want to go to something I had started talking about, which is still within the naming complex, but it is the idea of how your name is not a noun, it's a verb. So much of the way in which one can argue West African languages work, they're all a qua subset. So for the linguist, I'm sure it's a larger context. But most names are an elision of a sentence. Right? So shortening of a sentence to a name. And then that sentence is actually the reduction of a paragraph. And that paragraph then can lead you down various rabbit holes. So for instance, I have very close cousins whose last name is Awo, and Awo means snake. And I remember when my cousin had to get married, and it was a very complex matter, this name, because he was getting married within the context of born-again Christianity. And so because snake is linked to the biblical snake that gave Eve the apple, automatically his last name was then considered to almost derive out of evil, which again is sort of, as I was saying, when you practice an ancient system, you realize how much more complicated and advanced intellectually and philosophically those systems were. But his name is a family name, and it's an elision of his grandfather's Oriki, in which in Igbo was Oka Agwadabuchuzo Onyeja Gabuge. When the mighty snake straddles the footpath, who dares to cross? He was a very powerful warrior. And so automatically, that Oriki and the connection to him to being a warrior at the time, his great-grandfather already spoke to a turbulent time in the small town's history that I come from, and would have located them actually outside of being what you can call indigenous in the original way. So most of my family, going back on my father's side, have been in Afikpo, Ehubo, long before it had any names. They were Neolithic. But then over time, other people come. And the beautiful thing in Yoruba and Igbo ways of worldviews is that they're syncretic. So they take a person in, and you become part of what's called Amala. You become parts of the original people. But then that name can be traced back to another family name they have, which is Anigo. And so Anigo is actually a giraffe. Now, Afikpo, like most other southeastern Nigerian places, is in a rainforest, or used to be in a huge rainforest. Climate change has reduced that. So they would have had to have come from a place where there was a savanna, where there would have been giraffes, which would be much northern Nigeria. And it turns out they have origins among the Igala. So just from a name alone, a whole lineage can be determined if you then know how to ask. And which is why when you're young and in a very rural context in Nigeria, people meet you, they don't ask you your name. They ask you in Igbo, who claims you? But what lineage claims you? Because to be claimed is to be embraced, to be given a place in Ordinary, to be given a part of a lineage that stretches back into primordiality. And so but people don't want to know who you are. They want to establish your lineage. And then if your lineage is a lineage that is respected, then they will ask your father's name so they can locate within that lineage that's respected where your father ranks in it. And then if everything checks out, then they may ask you your name. So sometimes just having an exchange can take 15 minutes, but then it works so beautifully in an oral culture because it becomes a mnemonic device. So just a simple interaction with somebody will lay out. When I was a kid, I used to think it was the most annoying, aggravating thing. But as an adult, I wished that at the time there was a way to have recorded it, because I just say, well, when you say on that bani, non that bani. When do me. Well, okay, na you on the it's about Michael Abani. Well, Michael, no principal. Yes. I think, Moni, me, Abu Mweregi, I'm related to you. Imegema, you won't know. But nage, okay, moro idume chuku idume. Honorwa biarina, boom, your great grandfather, Chuku Idume, came to my village to treat someone. And we couldn't afford to pay him, so we gave him a wife. And that wife is my great grandmother's sister. And so you're standing there and a whole genealogy unfolds in the process of just ascertaining your name. And then the greetings commence. And I used to stand there thinking, look, I'm Chris. I got to go get some sweets. I don't know why we're having this conversation. So the names are so vital. And in a divination, in a Dafa or in Igbo, we say Bafa, it is your name and your mother's name that we need for the divination, because entities locate you via DNA. And so your mother's name, obviously, because it's the one DNA we can be sure of, right? Not everybody's father is their father, but everybody's mother is their mother. So names, connections to lineages, to sources of power, to even Ashe. So here I am. I'm raised Catholic. My mother was Anglican, and when she married my father, she converted to Catholicism, which made her a very rabid Catholic. As I don't know if you know, but when people convert to religions, they as I say in Nigeria, you carry on for head. You kind of go excessive with that. And then my father, who had grown up and simultaneously within Catholicism, my grandfather, his father, had been a houseboy to the priests, who had granted him all his scholarships to the West where he met my mother in Oxford in the 50s. So he had this double relationship to our indigenous system, Egbele, and Catholicism. And Catholicism was a very flexible religion. As long as you turned up on Sunday, gave them a place to build a school and land, and paid money here and there, they didn't really try to convert. It wasn't a rabid form of Christianity. But so here I am, raised in this kind of context, but simultaneously now with grandparent figures who were diviners, who were Dibyas or Dibyafas. And growing up, learning how to cast. Then we didn't use Opele as we have it in Ifa. We had, I think we maybe called Agbeba. It's like the 4-chain system. Learning how to offer kolanats, or learning how to do basic rituals, simultaneously with being in seminary to be a Catholic priest. So my spiritual journey has been, to put it mildly, very complicated. And so I was in junior seminary, and because I suppose my name is a search for wisdom, I was never satisfied. I was always looking for the thing behind the thing, and after a while I was asked to leave the seminary because I was leaning dangerously close for the Catholics into heresy, and the knowledge that you should know God in a much more intimate way. And so at 12, I actually literally had to leave and go back to regular secondary school, whereupon I know if you grew up in Nigeria in the 70s and 80s, every religious path, every spiritual path was available and usually had centers. So I became a Tibetan Buddhist for a while. And then when that didn't seem to fit, about 14, I left home to go to Benin City, where there was the only Hare Krishna ashram. And within 2 weeks, they realized I was looking for something else, and they actually drove me back to my parents and pretended that they were doing the right thing. I've been a Hindu. I learned all the pujas. I learned all the systems. I was a Rosicrucian for a long time. I was in Ekankar for a long time. I mean, I drove my family crazy because every time I found a new system, then all the other systems were rubbish, and this was the system. My uncle started a thing called Grail Message. I was in that. My other uncle started Baha'i, and so I was in Baha'i. And then from Baha'i, I skipped to Sufism. So I went through all these journeys, and then for a long time, I practiced what you might call a Christabanism, a kind of syncretic worldview. And it was a mixture of different meditations and all of this. And then finally, in the US, out of all places, I was led to Ababalao. And so then I initiated into Ifa, which was about 11 years ago. And it's been the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. It's the most ethically challenging path that exists. You're literally held to the standards of an Orisha. So your behavior, as much as possible, has to approximate the Orisha you're initiated into. And that's what I've been doing, trying to uncover more and more about what this fantastic over 10, 15,000 year old way of being, because it's not a religion. It's much more complex than that. That's my journey. So when I say that Ifa has been the most ethically challenging path I've undertaken, it is because Ifa's push is towards ethics rather than morality. And the reason for this is that it is believed that an ethical life automatically produces correct morals. But the problem with morality itself is it's unreliable. It changes with time, it changes with space, it changes even with culture. But an ethical lifestyle is asking you to not react to things, but to respond to things, so that you're always taking a step back to study every moment you find yourself in before you push forward. I'm going to read in English a verse of Ifa from the Holy Odu, Irosu Ngori. Let us do things with joy. Those who want to go, let them go. Those who want to stay, let them stay. Surely humans have been chosen to bring good into the world. The all-knowing one, priest of Oromila, interpreted the teachings of Ifa for Oromila. He said the people of the world would come to ask him a certain question. He said Oromila should sacrifice. Oromila heard and complied. One day, all kinds of people, good people and those who do not allow good in others' lives, gathered together. They went to Oromila and they said, coming back and forth to earth tires us, Oromila. Therefore, please allow us to rest in heaven, the other side. And Oromila said, you cannot avoid going back and forth to earth until you bring about the good condition that Olodumare has ordained for every human being. After then you may rest. And they asked, what is the good condition? Oromila said, the good condition is a good world, in a world in which there is full knowledge of all things, happiness everywhere, life without anxiety or fear of enemies, without clashes with snakes or other dangerous animals, without fear of death, disease, litigation, losses, wizards, witches, without fear of injury from water or fire, and without fear of poverty or misery. Because of your wisdom, your compelling desire for good character, and your internal strength. These things are what you need to bring about the good condition in the world. Wisdom that is fully adequate to govern the world, sacrifice, character, the love of doing good for all people, especially those who are in need and those who seek assistance from us, and the eagerness and struggle to increase good in the world and not let any of it at all be lost. People will continue to go back and forth from the other side, and they will go back and forth to earth after every transfiguration until everyone has achieved the good condition. Thus, when the children of Oduduwa gather together, those chosen to bring good into the world are called human beings, or the chosen one. So, and even, the imperative here is that essentially everyone's destiny is to resolve a good condition in the world for everyone. In Ifa, in Isheshe, in Omenang, you don't hear a lot about love. Like, it's not about love in the way you hear about it in other religions. There's nothing sentimental about this. It's always about wisdom and good character. Because effectively, the whole point of Ifa is to transform individual lives and collective cultures into a full transfiguration, where basically the issues that have come to plague us don't plague us anymore. It is not a system of change or a path of change. Change is small increments. Ifa is total transformation, total transfiguration. This is the journey we're on. Now, even within this journey, it's interesting to note that from what I just read to you, the system doesn't say good people and bad people. It simply says good people and those who do not wish to bring good into other people's lives. So this idea is overwhelming when you think about it, because it means within that phrase alone, multiple things exist always. One is the capacity for transfiguration, for transformation, by obeying these four simple rules, right? Which are you can say the four pillars of the worship of the system. One is the desire for good, which in a way you can almost conflate with the path of bhakti, of devotion. So every devotee of the system has an orisha that they devote themselves to, they prostrate to, they greet, they sing orikis to, they bring closer into understanding for. Two, the offerings, the idea of ritual, that to transform things is not a miracle from heaven. It is a science that if you mix certain herbs together, if you bring natural elements together, you can create consciousnesses, intelligences, processes that will then sustain change towards transformation. The fourth is the seeking of wisdom and knowledge. So it's the intellectual path, the path where it is not enough to sit there saying, oh, I'm a good person, too many people are suffering. The question is, what are you doing with it? And then the fourth part, which is the meditative part, which is the contemplative part, which you may call ijinle, is the ability to go within yourself, to ponder these things. Why is there reincarnation? What is the purpose of that? So literally you have four parts of the whole practice: devotion, ritual, contemplation, and intellectual. So the four paths are integrated to complete a human being. Because then to be a human being, to be a neon, to be Iburomado, as we say in Igbo, Igbo no ga no here. You're not a ranko, you're not wild. So to be human is to be conscious. And to be conscious is to be aware. And consciousness doesn't need belief. It's based on experience. We don't believe things in Ifa, Ishishe, or Menane. We see it happen and we know this is true. So it's a transformational process. So transformational process where you're transforming first your psychological nature, which is what good character is. Good character overwhelmingly is something everybody knows. It's about being sensible. So good character is Iwakwele, beautiful action, beautiful character, beautiful behavior. And what is it? Someone's yelling at you in the street and you don't respond. You kind of take a moment to wonder, what's the best response here? What's the best way out? And the moment you have that pause, that consciousness or character, which is really the ability to be still in the face of something, to see a clear path forward, automatically morality will happen. What you're doing is offering service first, and then the service must uplift not only you but everyone around you. And there's no gain in only your own upliftment, because what is the point of that? How is that a good condition? And the good condition is not giving people money here and there to show your philanthropy. It's creating lasting systems that transform their poverty into the good condition. A life system, a life ecosystem where everything flourishes in complete balance. And that is everybody's destiny. Your destiny is to achieve that kind of enlightenment, right? We will say that a human being is primarily composed of three things: Ori, Ifa, and Egbe. And it's same in Igbo. It's Chupu, Chigi, Uke. And so you find that this is the drive. So, and by that then, to be ethical means you're not allowed to be upset. Even within the Awo system, there are fixed taboos for everybody, right? Things you cannot go against if you want to maintain balance in your own life. And for Babalawo, not mistreating women, not looking down on women, understanding that the very ability, the capacity to be an Awo is a gift to men from women. Knowledge, wisdom, because from wisdom comes a true love, not a selfish love, not a conditional love. That wisdom of understanding that you are part of a larger matrix of life, and that you and everyone else is doing their best to kind of play the role that will create this sort of sustainability and elevation into a transfiguration, what higher love can there be? Isn't that the agape that the Christians talk about, but seldom approach or even have found a practical way to live? It's a profound system. It's an incredible system. And you can fit everything into it, but you can't fit it into anything. You can fit Islam, you can fit any religious or spiritual practice, even Hinduism. The four parts of Ifa, you can say Bhakti, devotion, Raja, the intellectual path, Japa, which is kind of the Oriki and the chanting and the ritual path, and then you can put Raja, right, which is the sort of wisdom path. So even if you took Hinduism, it fits into Isheshe and Odinane in the Igbo case. But Odinane or Isheshe cannot fit into anything else. Ifa is the entire archive of an entire people. It is the one system that has never gone to war for itself. There's no other system in the world that can say that. It doesn't fight with anyone. It doesn't preach to anyone. It's not trying to convert anyone. It respects everyone. So for me, it's profound. It's an incredibly complex system. And the more you live it as a practitioner or as a priest particularly, the more you realize that you are a Babalawo first, a priest first, that your shrine and your practice is your primary self, and everything else emanates from that.
If you ever need a new place to go, you can join me in a world of words. Many seems like I'm nowhere to be found. If you look, you'll find me in a book. Let's take a ride to the past in the back of a phoenix. Let's float around the moon. You'll never be alone. Now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the word in a book. You'll never be alone. Now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the word in a book.
We don't just think of ourselves as a bank. We think of ourselves as corporate citizens with responsibility for growing the economy. Reading and education is a key part of it. But equally important is having access to reading materials at home. A lot of the intervention we've done throughout this COVID is to ensure that people can safely navigate the uncertainties of the COVID crisis and come out of it ready for, to live again.
Let's take a ride to the past in the back of a phoenix. Let's float around the moon.
The dreams that we have are limited by what we have directly interacted with. What reading does is it makes it possible for you to begin to live in worlds that don't yet exist. One read creates a discipline of reading. One read puts me on a timeline. It gives me an important book and I have an opportunity to read it and to collaborate. It's almost like having someone who does your book selection for you. If you have editors and people who are really good at this saying to you, this is the book for the month, I value that. I want to be able to read in a community. I want reading to be a collaborative thing. I want reading to be a communing, and one read allows me to do that. I will use one read any day, anytime.
Stranger's Guide is not a typical American travel magazine. Our mission is to dive deep into a single location, commissioning work from great writers and photographers, famous individuals, as well as up-and-coming new voices. This year, we decided to go to Lagos. And we are proud of the volume we produced, with original work from some of Nigeria's best writers and photographers, working with luminaries like Wale Soyinka, Molara Wood, and Femi Kuti. We think this is a very special volume, and we're so excited to bring it back to Lagos.
Sticky, spicy, sweet. Don't touch me. I will get you arrested. Very, very easy. Relax, everybody!
He shot you!
That 5 minutes madness only you can understand. Visit myspectre.com to get your Spectre experience. Spectre, loans in 5 minutes.